Caleb Vance is the city's most feared fixer, a man with a heart of stone, until he found me shivering in the dark. Caleb Vance doesn't have a heart. He has a stone-cold calculation where his soul should be. That was the rumor in the city's underbelly, and as I stared down the barrel of his suppressed pistol, I believed every word of it. I had seen the exchange. I had seen the blood on the warehouse floor. And now, the fixer had found me shivering behind a stack of shipping crates. Caleb didn't look like a killer. He looked like an executive who had stepped out of a nightmare. His charcoal suit was immaculate, his dark hair swept back, and his eyes, they were the color of a winter sea, cold, endless, unforgiving. "Please," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I didn't see anything, I swear." He didn't blink. He took a step toward me, his shadow swallowing me whole. He reached out and I flinched, expecting the end. Instead, his gloved fingers gripped my chin, forcing me to look at him. He studied me for a long, agonizing minute, the silence heavy with the scent of rain and gunpowder. "Maya Thorne," he said, his voice a low, gravelly vibration. 24, librarian, no family left to miss you. You're a ghost in this city, Maya." "Then let me stay a ghost," I pleaded. He lowered the gun, but the intensity in his gaze didn't fade. "The men I work for want you gone. If I walk away, they'll send someone who enjoys the sound of screaming. I don't enjoy it, it's inefficient." He grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "You're coming with me. From this moment on, you don't exist. You stay in my house, you follow my rules, and you don't speak unless I tell you to. Do you understand?" I nodded, too terrified to do anything else. He led me to a black SUV, and as we drove away from the docks, I realized I hadn't been saved. I had just been claimed by the most dangerous man in the city. Caleb's house was a fortress of glass, and shadows perched on the edge of a cliff. It was beautiful, sterile, and terrifyingly lonely. He didn't speak to me as he showed me to a room that looked like it belonged in a 5-star hotel, yet felt like a prison cell. "The security system is biometric," he said, standing in the doorway. "If you try to open a window or a door without my code, the sirens will alert the local police and my employers. And trust me, Maya, you don't want them finding you." "Why are you doing this?" I asked, clutching a pillow to my chest. "You hate everyone, why risk your life for me?" Caleb paused, his back to me. His shoulders were broad, a heavy weight seemingly resting on them. "I don't risk my life for anyone. I'm keeping you here because you're a variable I haven't solved yet. Now, sleep. I have work to do." I watched him walk away, the click of his polished shoes echoing through the marble hallway. For the next 3 days, I was a ghost in his house. He left before dawn and returned long after midnight. He never ate with me. He never looked at me. But every morning, there was a fresh plate of food on the counter and a new book from the library on my nightstand. It was a man who hated the world, a man who treated every human interaction like a chess move. Yet he was keeping me fed. He was keeping me safe. I found myself sitting at the top of the stairs at 1:00 a.m., waiting for the sound of his key in the lock. I told myself it was for safety, but deep down, I knew it was because the silence of the house was more frightening than the man himself. When he finally walked in, he looked exhausted, his tie loosened. He caught sight of me and stopped. "Go to bed, Maya," he rasped, his eyes flashing with a brief, unreadable emotion. "I'm not a man you want to wait up for." A week into my captivity, the outside world caught up with us. I was in the kitchen, trying to make sense of the high-tech coffee machine, when the front door burst open. It wasn't Caleb. It was a man with a jagged scar across his face and a smile that made my stomach churn. "So this is where Caleb hides his little secret," the man sneered, drawing a knife. I backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Who are you?" A reminder of what happens when employees get sentimental. He lunged, but before the blade could touch me, a blur of movement came from the hallway. Caleb slammed into the man with the force of a freight train. It wasn't a fight. It was a demolition. Caleb didn't use a gun. He used his hands. He was a beast unleashed, his face contorted in a silent, terrifying rage. He didn't stop until the intruder was unconscious on the floor. Caleb stood over him, his chest heaving, his knuckles bloody. He turned to me, and for the first time the sea-colored eyes weren't cold. They were burning. He stalked toward me, and I braced myself, but he didn't strike me. He grabbed my shoulders, checking me for wounds with a frantic, desperate energy. "Did he touch you?" he demanded, his voice a raw growl. "Did he hurt you, Maya?" "No," I whispered, trembling. "I'm okay." He let out a breath that sounded like a sob, and suddenly he pulled me against him. He was solid, warm, and smelled like rain. He held me so tight I could barely breathe, his head resting against mine. "He shouldn't have been able to get past the gate. I failed. I won't fail again." In that moment, the fixer was gone. He was just a man who was terrified of losing the one thing he had left to protect. He hated the world, but he was holding on to me like I was his only anchor to humanity. After the attack, Caleb didn't leave the house. He moved his office to the dining room table, surrounding himself with monitors and encrypted files. He was obsessed with finding out who had breached his security. The tension in the house was a living thing, thick and suffocating. "You need to sleep, Caleb," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder as he stared at a screen at 3:00 a.m. He flinched at the touch, his muscles coiling like a spring. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot. "I can't sleep. If I close my eyes, I see him in the kitchen. I see what happens if I'm a second too late." "I'm right here," I said softly. "I'm safe." He grabbed my wrist, pulling me into the chair next to him. He didn't let go. He held my hand as he worked, his thumb tracing circles over my knuckles. It was a silent admission of how much he needed the contact. We sat there for hours, the only sound the hum of the computers and our synchronized breathing. "Why do you hate them so much?" I asked. "The people you work for." Caleb stayed silent for a long time. "They took a boy who wanted to be an artist and turned him into a weapon. They taught me that everyone has a price and every life is disposable. I hated them for what they did to me, so I started hating everyone else to make it easier." He looked at me, his gaze softening. "Then I saw you in that warehouse. You weren't a price. You were just life. And I realized I couldn't let them kill the only beautiful thing I'd seen in a decade." The honesty in his voice was a physical weight. He wasn't just protecting my body. He was protecting the last shard of his own heart. I leaned my head on his shoulder, and for the first time, he didn't tell me to go to bed. He just held my hand tighter and let the dark hold us both. The threat outside didn't go away, but the threat inside, the one between us, was becoming unbearable. The protector and the protected dynamic was shifting into something much more intimate and much more dangerous. We were standing in his room, the rain lashing against the glass walls, as he showed me a hidden safe room in case of another breach. "If anything happens, you go in here and you don't come out until I call your name. Only my name, Maya. Do you understand?" "Stop talking like you're going to die," I snapped, my eyes filling with tears. "I can't lose you, Caleb." He froze, his jaw tightening. "Don't say that. You don't know me. You only know the version of me that saves you." "I know the man who reads me books. I know the man who holds my hand when the world gets too dark." I stepped into his space, my heart pounding. "I know you, Caleb Vance." He let out a low, tortured sound and grabbed the back of my neck, pulling me into a kiss that was a decade's worth of repressed longing. It was fierce, desperate, and tasted like salt and surrender. When we moved to the bed, it wasn't a fixer and a witness. It was two broken people trying to make something whole in the middle of a war zone. Making love with Caleb was an emotional revelation. He was possessive but incredibly gentle, his touch worshipful as if he couldn't believe I was real. He whispered my name against my skin like a prayer, his eyes never leaving mine. In the quiet aftermath, as he held me close, I realized the truth. He didn't hate everyone. He just hated a world that didn't have me in it. But as the sun began to peek over the cliff, a silent alert pulsed on his phone. The war was coming to his front door. Caleb was out of bed before I could even wake up properly. He was dressing in his black tactical gear, his face back to that stone-cold mask. The beast was back, and it was ready for blood. "They're here," he said, checking his magazines. "My employer, Mr. Rossi, he knows I've been lying. He's brought an army, Maya. We can call the police. We can run." "There's nowhere to run from Rossi," Caleb said, his voice flat. "He owns the police. He owns the roads. The only way out is through." He handed me a small, silver key. "Safe room now." I watched him go, my heart breaking. I sat in that cold, steel-lined room, listening to the muffled sounds of gunfire and shouting echoing through the house. Minutes felt like hours. Then, the door to the safe room hissed open. I expected Caleb. Instead, it was Caleb's partner, Elias, a man I'd seen in the warehouse. He was smiling. "Caleb sent me to get you. It's over. He's waiting at the car." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to run into Caleb's arms. But as I walked out, I saw Caleb on the floor of the foyer, surrounded by Rossi's men. He was beaten, bleeding, and held down by 3 people. He looked at me, and his eyes screamed a warning I understood too late. Elias wasn't a partner. He was the mole. He had sold Caleb out for a seat at Rossi's table. "See, Caleb," Rossi said, stepping out of the shadows. "I told you sentimentality was a fatal flaw. Now watch as I correct your mistake." He raised a gun toward my head. Rossi didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. He wanted Caleb to suffer first. He wanted to break the man who had been his most loyal weapon. "I'll give you a choice, Caleb," Rossi said, circling his fallen soldier. "You kill her yourself, prove you're still the machine I built, and I'll let you live. You can even have your old job back, or I kill you both right now." Caleb looked at me, his face a mess of blood and bruises. He looked broken. He looked like he was about to give up. Then he looked at Rossi. "Give me the gun." My heart stopped. The men let Caleb up and Rossi handed him the pistol. Caleb walked toward me, the weapon heavy in his hand. Every step felt like a heartbeat. He stopped inches from me, the barrel pointing at my chest. I looked into his eyes, looking for a sign, a flicker of the man who had held me the night before. "I'm sorry, Maya," he whispered. He pulled the trigger. The bang was deafening. I felt a sharp sting in my shoulder, and the world went black as I hit the floor. When I woke up, I was in the back of a van. Caleb was there, but he wasn't holding a gun. He was stitching a wound in my shoulder. "Stay still," he commanded, his hands shaking. "You shot me," I wheezed. "Grazed you," he corrected. The blood was enough to convince Rossi. I had a flashbang rigged to the foyer lights. When the room went white, I took Rossi out and grabbed you. He looked out the back window at the burning wreckage of his house on the cliff. "I lost the house. I lost the money. I lost my name." "You saved me," I said, reaching for his hand. "I saved myself," he replied. "A world without you isn't worth living in." We spent the next 3 months living in a cabin in the middle of the woods, far from any city or any fixers. Caleb had changed. He didn't wear suits anymore. He wore flannel and work boots, his days spent chopping wood and his nights spent watching the perimeter. He was still hypervigilant, still a man who looked for threats in every shadow, but the hatred had faded into a quiet, protective peace. "Are we always going to be running?" I asked one evening as we sat by the fire. "I'm done running, Maya. I'm just waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For them to realize that I'm more dangerous as a dead man than I ever was as an employee." He pulled a tablet from a hidden floorboard. It was filled with Rossi's financial records, his kill orders, and his deep state connections. "I didn't just take you from that foyer. I took his entire empire. If he wants it back, he has to come to me. And this time, it's on my turf." He looked at me, and I saw the fixer again, not the beast, but the strategist. He had been planning this since the moment he picked me up at the docks. He had turned himself into the ultimate bait, and Rossi was too arrogant to see the trap. "When this is over," Caleb said, taking my hand, "I'm going to take you to a place where no one knows our names. A place where you can be a librarian again and I can be whatever you want me to be." "I just want you to be Caleb," I said. He kissed my forehead, a silent promise. But we both knew that Rossi wouldn't send a message. He would send an executioner, and the executioner was already in the woods. They came at dawn. 6 men, highly trained, moving through the trees like smoke. But Caleb had spent weeks rigging the forest. He didn't use a gun at first. He used the environment. Tripwires sent logs swinging. Hidden pits claimed 2 men before they even reached the cabin. I was in the cellar, clutching a shotgun Caleb had taught me to use, listening to the screams outside. Caleb was a ghost in the trees. He wasn't protecting a house or a company anymore. He was protecting his life. My life. The door to the cellar was kicked in. I raised the gun, but it was Caleb. He was covered in dirt and blood, but it wasn't his. He looked like a god of war. "It's done," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Rossi is the only one left. He's in the clearing." We walked out together. Rossi was standing by his car, his hands up, his face pale. He looked at Caleb and laughed, a high, panicked sound. "You think this ends here? I have people you haven't even heard of, Caleb. They'll find you." Caleb didn't say a word. He walked up to Rossi, looked him in the eye, and handed him the tablet with all the data. "I've already sent this to the FBI, the CIA, and your competitors. By the time the sun is fully up, your empire is gone. You're not a king anymore, Rossi. You're just a man with a lot of enemies." Caleb turned his back and walked away. Rossi pulled a hidden derringer from his sleeve, but I was faster. I didn't kill him, but the shot to his leg sent him screaming to the ground. Caleb didn't even look back. He just put his arm around me and kept walking. Rossi wasn't worth the bullet. A year later. We weren't in the woods, and we weren't in a fortress on a cliff. We were in a small, coastal town in Italy. The air smelled of salt and lemon trees, and the only fixing Caleb did was the leaky faucet in our kitchen. He had a small workshop where he made furniture, woodwork that was as precise as his tactical plans used to be. I worked at the local bookstore, my days filled with the stories of others, while I lived the best one of my own. Caleb was standing on the balcony, looking out at the Mediterranean. He looked younger. The lines of tension around his eyes had smoothed out, replaced by a quiet, deep-seated contentment. I walked up behind him, wrapping my arms around his waist. "Thinking about the past?" I asked. "No," he said, turning around to pull me into his chest. "Thinking about the future. I was thinking about what we should name the baby." I smiled, my hand resting on the slight swell of my stomach. "You were always a man who planned ahead." "I spent my whole life hatting everyone because it was safe," Caleb said, his voice soft and full of emotion. "I thought love was a weakness that Rossi could use against me. I didn't realize it was the only thing that could actually make me strong enough to beat him." He leaned down, kissing me with a tenderness that still made my heart race. The man who hated everyone was gone. In his place was a man who loved one person so much it had saved his soul. We had walked through fire to get here, but as we looked out at the peaceful sea, I knew the blueprints for our life were finally perfect. No more glass walls, no more safe rooms, just us. And the beautiful, quiet life we had built from the ashes of a fixer's heart.